What is up, people? Welcome back to King Pilled for the second time today. And I'm looking at my YouTube live studio here, and the stream is not showing up as actually working. So it looks like the demons are hard at work trying to hold us down today. I am joined today by a guest. I'll bring him in so we could kind of banter through this as I try to figure it out. I've got the guy that I have now deemed the new right late night guy. That's Wade Stotts. What's up, Wade? How's it going, man?
Good to be here. Thank you so much for having me, sir.
Absolutely.
Good time.
So yeah, I think
it's fair to say we are being canceled.
Yes.
It's happening. It's happening right now on the air.
Yeah, I'm right on the verge of my big break. You know, we're starting to take over the culture, and then here we go, getting canceled. All right, so we are streaming on Twitter. That is there. So let me drop this into the YouTube live chat. I have no idea why it didn't work. I know I set it up right, but I will tell the fine people there that we are just on Twitter right now.
Yep.
We're live on.
We're just
Twitter.
being dangerous. Too dangerous over here.
Yeah, we're like. Yep. Was it Miley Yiannopoulos had something about being dangerous?
Oh yeah, was that his book? Yeah. Oh yeah. Something about being a dangerous sort of person. Whatever that was. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to try one other thing and see if we can get this working on YouTube. And if it doesn't work, then this is just going to be a Twitter only stream for right now. Okay, so there's something going on with the YouTube channel. It just says that it's sending data, but YouTube's not receiving it. So maybe we'll finish with this stream and I'll find out that I don't have a YouTube channel anymore. We'll find out.
Yeah, we'll see.
Okay. So actually,
it's great to be here on your premiere as a Twitter exclusive show.
That's right.
I just want to say that. Very exciting.
It is good to know that if we do have, if I do lose the YouTube channel, I don't have any expectation of losing the Twitter account anytime soon.
That's true. Yeah. Thank you, Elon. Yeah. Maybe Elon's watching and he can talk to the people at YouTube.
That's right. Yeah. Give old Susan a call for me and
please do.
So, Wade, tell the people. There's probably some people in my audience who may know who you are and don't realize that they know who you are.
Okay.
Tell the people who you are.
Who am I? Well, I am Wade Stotts. I live in Moscow, Idaho. When I grow up, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. But right now, what I do is I make a couple of weekly videos, try to do sort of like stuff about politics, stuff about culture, and mostly in like a sort of monologue format, straight to camera. Pre-written, kind of a late night monologue, as you said, you've dubbed me the new right late night guy. But yeah, so I just try to take on that format and talk about stuff that I care about. And a lot of the stuff that is in late night is stuff that I don't care about. So I just try to limit it. And because I know that it would be tempting to just talk about everything. There's so much going on in the news and easy to get Twitter brain. But yeah, if something passes my I care about it filter, then it ends up on the show, on the Wade Show with Wade.
Would you say that you are colonizing the late night show format with your dangerous Christian right wing ideas?
I would say so. Yeah, that's probably fair. I'm a colonialist.
I've got an example of one of your videos pulled up here because I want to ask you a little bit more about the format. And for the people who haven't seen him yet, first of all, you need to go follow Wade on Twitter and then go subscribe to him on YouTube, The Wade Show with Wade. Yep. So I'll just play this video here for you guys so you get a feel for the format and the brilliant wit of our guest here, and then we'll talk about it a little more.
Yesterday, Donald Trump was found guilty on all 34 counts in his New York trial, an historic first for a former U.S. president. It's the biggest presidential legal news since Taft sued the company that made that bath. And if you thought Trump was in danger of tempering some of his harsher immigration policies, he was convicted by a Colombian guy named Juan. Trump will be sentenced July 11th, just 4 days before the Republican National Convention, which if you gave me a choice between the two, I'd pick jail every time. Then again, this year at the RNC, we might get to see Kristi Noem drown a baby rabbit. Don't get that kind of entertainment in jail. So for those who are paying attention, this is how politics works in America now. If you're a threat, this is how the regime treats you. And for a look at how they treat people who are not threats, look no further than this week's Libertarian National Convention. Yes, that was also this week. Today, the floors of the DC Hilton are littered with tri-cornered hats and discarded vape pens. But earlier this week, it was hopping. Like the Republicans in the presidential debates, these people think they're on the bleeding edge of politics. But unlike the Republicans, this isn't a race to see who can get the biggest campaign contributions or who can get the nicest office at Raytheon. For the Libertarians, it's a race to see who can be the most ideologically pure.
Should someone have to have a government-issued license to drive a car?
Hell no.
What's next? Requiring a license to make toast in your own damn toaster?
The license to drive? You know, I'd like to see some competency exhibited by people before they drive.
That clip was from a few years ago, but that's still the temperature of the room. When Trump spoke at the Libertarian convention, he had a suggestion for them.
The Libertarian Party should nominate Trump for President of the United States. Whoa. That's nice. That's nice. Only if you want to win. Only if you want to win. Maybe you don't want to win.
And yes, they just booed winning. Because for libertarians, losing is the only way to stay pure. Trump's approach was alien to them. He offered to do things they wanted if they voted for him.
And if you vote for me on day one, I will commute the sentence of Ross Ulbricht. That is why I'm committing to you tonight that I will put a libertarian in my cabinet.
As Jeffrey Tucker said, it was a weirdly honest way to campaign. It's a way of talking that's natural to someone who's used to getting things done, but it turns out that's not what these guys do. In the end, they kicked him out of their sandbox and selected as their nominee this man.
Chase Oliver is a former Georgia Senate candidate who describes himself as armed and gay.
Gotta be honest, if I had to pick 2 words to describe the Libertarian Party, I couldn't have done better than that. He's also pro-trans treatment for kids, pro-drag queen story hours, he was very afraid of COVID, and he's also pro-open borders. So why don't the Libertarians want to win if it means voting for Trump? Well, for one, they think that Trump shouldn't deport illegals because that would mean spending money. Take this article from Reason.com. Trump's tough immigration talk comes with a high price tag. Are Americans prepared to spend $1 trillion to deport undocumented immigrants? I'd pay $1 trillion just to get to pull on Nick Gillespie's hair. I will start a crowdfunding campaign right now. Now, I don't want to reduce immigration to just economic factors. I'm not a libertarian. But the economic impact is real.
We have new numbers, a new report from the U.S. House Committee on Homeland Security majority. They say the price tag per year is $451 billion.
And that's just illegal immigration. So if it takes $1 trillion to deport the illegals, we'd be saving money in year 3. Sure, we'd lose stuff, but on the other hand, you might get an Uber Eats driver who speaks English. There are lots of people who call themselves libertarians who are better on immigration and other issues. I still love Ron Paul and Murray Rothbard. But here's what happens every time someone in their party says something sane.
Children do need some protection. Yes, you should not be able to sell heroin to a 5-year-old.
They're more used to displays like this.
Man stripping down in the middle of the National Libertarian Party convention last Sunday in Orlando.
Don't worry, the striptease had an important ideological message.
The political system is so corrupt that it needs to be stripped down to nothing.
That's why you took your clothes off?
That's why I took my clothes off.
If he's trying to make me more libertarian, it's having the opposite effect. Maybe firing squads aren't such a bad idea. The truth is that ideology makes you stupid. Russell Kirk said it's like a drug, and there's nothing more these libertarians love than drugs. Except perhaps sodomy.
Voting and gender are non-binary.
Libertarians think the government does too much, regulates too much, so we need to cut back on that, and we'd return to a good society. But the fact is that many people get a free pass under the current regime. What we're living under is what Sam Francis called anarcho-tyranny. Don't worry, I have a video on that. But from one angle, it looks pretty libertarian. Lax drug laws, bail reform, bail funds for violent protesters, lax sentencing. If you're an asset to the regime, your life is a libertarian's dream. Basically, libertarians want to live like Hunter Biden. But the only people who get to live like that are people the regime favors. I also wonder if libertarians ever notice that all their wins are also wins for the left, while all their losses are losses for the right. But that would require some amount of reflection and self-awareness. Trump gets the book thrown at him because someone filled out a spreadsheet wrong. At the same time, migrants and police are openly brawling in the streets of New York. Daniel Penny faces charges for trying to protect people against an insane person on a New York subway, while criminals keep getting released. But the real threat is this guy falsifying business records. Again, that's our system, anarcho-tyranny. You can't applaud the anarchy and act baffled at the tyranny. I'm getting hung up on the policy stuff, but it wouldn't matter if Chase Oliver's politics were perfect. In other words, if he agreed with me on every issue. No matter what his policy positions are, he doesn't matter. He's just a guy talking on the internet. He has as much real political power as I do. Just like power isn't a trophy for winning a debate club, it's not a trophy you get for landing on the very bottom of the political compass test. When you're actually in politics, they give you judges that will break the so-called rules to get a conviction. And the media will talk about the judge like this.
As you've noted with respect to Judge Marchand, I mean, I'm like now, I have like a man crush on him. He is such a great judge.
On the other hand, no one is going to arrest Chase Oliver to try to keep him out of the White House. So yes, we're in a spot where the leading presidential candidate has been convicted on some bogus charges, while some people get to pretend that's just the process working itself out. Things are getting crazy, and my guess is that we haven't even seen the worst of it.
What's next? Requiring a license to make toast in your own damn toaster?
Oh man, I watched that moment happen live. I can't believe
you were there.
Not there in person. I was watching it
yeah.
live streamed. Yeah, when Trump went in there and dunked all over them, I said this wasn't the first time that an orange guy went and destroyed the Libertarian Party convention.
Oh man, yeah. No, I love those guys. I have a weird affection for like the sort of ideological minded guy who just is obsessed with like, just there being no government at all. Just Oh, I love it.
So did you ever go through? Did you have a libertarian ANCAP? I know I've heard you mention Tom Woods in the past. Have you had an experience like that?
So I love Tom Woods. I still do, and I think that there's like the best libertarians are still like I will cheer on those guys all day long. But yeah, I did have a time where I was like reading Ron Paul and reading Tom Woods and like was super into that. I was at the same time never like fully on board with it. I mean, I initially was very like attracted by the idea like, oh cool, we could just take the government out of marriage, galaxy brain move, and then everything actually everything is just going to kind of work itself out. But honestly, it was like, it was a very brief kind of time where it was attractive to me, but still I like my affection for Ron Paul didn't go away. And my affection, like I will never like badmouth Ron Paul. I would never and same with Tom Woods. Like I think those guys are great. And mainly because I think both of them have a strong like traditionalist streak. Mm-hmm. And like Tom Woods is, I think he wrote a whole book that's like how the Catholic Church built civilization or whatever. And it's like the guy knows history, the guy understands tradition and understands the value of that. Same with Ron Paul. And like, even if I disagree with him about a handful of things, it's still like, because he's making arguments in that direction because he cares about America and the founding. And that's a much more attractive kind of libertarianism than just again, trying to make this utopia in your head and like impose that. Cause whatever that is, your end result's going to look pretty ugly. But anyway, like I said, I did have a brief phase of that, but it was always tempered by my like love for the past and like attempting to like the best libertarians are still the guys that I appreciate. Were the guys that I was enjoying at the time.
Did you notice that that Tom Woods has changed the intro on his episode?
No, I didn't.
Yes, there is conspicuously missing any reference to liberty or libertarian.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it always was attractive to like his whole thing was attractive to me, like just tearing up the 3x5 card of acceptable opinion, right? It was like, cool. Like that's a guy who is okay with living outside of the Overton window. He doesn't see that as some kind of normative thing that he's got to obey. Which I always appreciated, but I hadn't noticed that about his recent shows.
It's only been within the last week or so, I think. And now it says taking a flamethrower to the narrative and like something about learning the things that the elites don't want you to know.
I love that.
Yes, he is. He's coming right along down the path along with the rest of us.
Well, he was a killer during like COVID stuff. Like early on, he was like releasing really great like little ebooks and free just kind of things where he was documenting everything. I haven't read his recent book, but I assume it's a lot of the same kind of stuff. And like at a time where there were just a handful of people who were talking about how like this is crazy, we're doing crazy stuff right now. He was right on it. But yeah, like I said, I'll never disown those guys, and I'm glad to hear about Tom Woods's recent changes. Even if it's just we've been using that intro for a long time. Let's do something else.
Yeah,
I like the direction.
Yeah, I happen to know from behind the scenes that not personally directly, but I know from behind the scenes that there's more to it than just refreshing the aesthetics on it. That
all right.
Tom has been, it's important to have guys, I think, and this comes back to you, I suppose. The the value in the type of content that you're producing. Because someone in the YouTube comments, YouTube stream's still not working, but he said that you could be a millennial whisperer like Orrin and Tucker are the boomer whisperers. Has that thought ever crossed your mind? Was that intentional, or are you just kind of pursuing your passion?
I'm very much a millennial. And so like my diet of trash pop culture definitely shows up in my episodes. So I'm just kind of doing what I do. And I also have like a boomer heart at some level as well. So I like communicating with those guys. My taste in pop culture is very millennial boomer melding. But I mean, if it's attractive to millennials, it's just because I am very much of my era.
Mm-hmm. I mentioned on my stream this morning when I was previewing the conversation we were going to have that it's kind of funny tracking the trajectory of these, what a dissident right wing or whatever we call ourselves, tracking the trajectory of these ideas as it seems very clearly that they're beginning to hit the mainstream. You're starting to see the fingerprints of Curtis Yarvin, as I've said it, are making it out into more popular circles. And it's interesting to see. So first of all, you have like normal television structure, which is just like talking points, 90-second spots, just buzz through it as quick as possible. Because this is like the thing that's optimized for the instancy-addled brains of the average consumer. But then Joe Rogan was really the first one who starts doing all this long-form content. And you get this little cottage industry of internet spurgs who start producing these long video essays and long live streams, going deep into all the philosophy and everything. And then you get someone like Orrin who shows up, and he has this unique ability to take all of this vast array of stuff that he's read and really condense it down and deliver it in pretty bite-sized chunks, which makes it a lot more adaptable to the Rush Limbaugh audience type of person. Yeah. But then as these ideas become more and more popular, now I recognize as soon as I saw your content, I was like, this is filling a new void. And that void is like the really easily shareable clip that's gonna, like someone who's just scrolling through TikTok or Instagram or whatever, like they'll sit and watch like a 3 or 4 minute breakdown. And the way you deliver it just speaks directly to the millennial mind. Yeah, well, is that something that how much of that has been cultivated and how much of that is just you're a millennial, so you think like a millennial?
Well, it's definitely both, but I think it's also just my preference in types of content I consume. So like I love the like 3-hour streams. I love the deep dives, and I've always been much more of a like enjoyer of that thing, and I couldn't produce it. I couldn't develop this. I'm not an academic, but I like listening to those guys. And so that's part of it. Is just I like translating. I like talking about it. And if it's stuff that I care about, then it's going to show up in whatever I do. But if I cared about, like, if I had other opinions, then I'd probably be doing similar like styles of content, but it would just be trash, you know. But yeah, I've always enjoyed the like late night format. There's something sticky about like those Jon Stewart monologues, and it really did kind of make a format that didn't exist before, but also was effective. And what the bad part about Jon Stewart is that the bad and the good part of it was that he made you like take on his assumptions as he was funny. And so like there's always subtext, there's always a bunch of thoughts behind it. But if he could be skilled enough, then you could get past a lot of barriers and make people laugh at things or laugh at politicians that they wouldn't have otherwise laughed at, or laugh at policies that they may not have otherwise laughed at. And that's huge. Like the ability to laugh at something. I was there's still like Stephen Colbert jokes from like forever ago that stick in my head. And one of them, there's one joke where he says something about like somebody was polling really low in the presidential polls, and like somebody came along with like 0.5%, and said, as pollsters know it, one Santorum. I was like, that's a great joke. And even though like whatever I might feel about Rick Santorum, I'm gonna laugh at that joke because it's very good. But yeah, it does break down stuff, but it's still also like I like the content, I like the way it's done. And so there's a matter of preference, and also just like I think it's effective, but it's not me like going, here's this effective tool, and then like trying to I don't know, trying to adapt myself to this tool that I think would be helpful. It actually is something that I enjoy doing. So there were like eras in like college when I was watching Conan and Letterman every day and was just like obsessed with trying to figure out what worked and why it worked and how things were going. So it's natural to me, and it's fun that my obsession is also an effective communication tool.
Yeah. I was going to say that the fact that it's something that comes naturally to you, I think is part of why it works so well. Because if I could see in a pragmatic sense why this format would be effective, but I would never be able to deliver it. It would take me forever,
Sure.
and I wouldn't have the timing and all that sort of thing. It's an art. There's an art to it, and it is very, very effective I would say in a subversive way, and saying that is like a positive thing. You're using humor and the format itself to slip past people's defenses, and there's also some power in like holding up this thing and mocking it, and then the natural human instinct is I don't want to be associated with that thing that's being mocked.
Yeah, right. You don't want to be cringe, and if you make our enemies sound cringe, then that is actually pretty persuasive.
Yeah,
but like I said, I admire those guys who could do 3-hour streams, like solo streams. Like I listen to Anthony Cumia. I'm a big fan of his. And I love that he can just like turn the microphones on and talk for 3 hours a day or like 2 hours a day by himself. Like it blows my mind that he can do that. But the fact that I obsess over every word, I'm just like, I gotta like move the commas around long enough until it works. I'm glad both there's a value in both. So the market is it's a happy little accident. Because I mean, at the time, like right now, is if I wanted to get into like traditional late night comedy, that would be a bad time. And like when I graduated college in 2014, and that was around the time when all the like shows were changing hands. And so it was if you've ever read like Aaron Renn talk about negative world and like neutral world and positive world, then like the late night shows changed hands at about the same time that Negative World started in Aaron Renn's sort of framing of it. And I always thought that was fascinating, but like but yeah, like that would have been a terrible time to get into the actual thing. Because yeah, it's effective, but right now it's not being effective because it's basically just like getting people to applaud for things they already agree with, or it's just sort of like they're like propagandists for the regime. And that is not an attractive thing for me. Because when I say I loved Letterman was a guy, and again, that's one of my most boomer opinions is loving Letterman. But like when Letterman was great was especially when he was at NBC and hated NBC and just thought it was the lamest place in the world where like all the shows went to die. He hated the company. It was like he was a guy who wasn't trying to get favor from his employers, which I actually enjoyed. I thought that was a cool spirit. And wasn't the kind of guy who would just be a 100% apologist for power. So yeah, anyway, I hope that at some level, the spirit of that kind of thing can be helpful to folks. When I was thinking about doing this, I like messaged a few people and was just like, is there even a space for this? Would this be a throwback? Would this seem like some kind of like, oh, we're doing our version of the thing that was cool 20 years ago? But like I think I've tried to make it into something that makes sense on the internet, and is not trying to I don't know, because like the actual late night guys, they have like audiences, and so the audience feeds it, so the timing is different, and the like the way it's structured is all different. But trying to repurpose that and go, okay, what was value here in terms of form, and then just like substitute my own content.
So you mentioned Tom Woods and his activities through the recent unpleasantness, and I know that a lot of guys, me and a lot of guys in the circles that I've rubbed elbows with, kind of went through a pretty big transformation period through the last 4 years to 8 years, kind of really the world kind of unlocking itself for us, and us really seeing it for what it is a lot more than we did before. How do you go from being a late night TV in the 90s and 2000s guy to dropping references about Carl Schmitt and anarcho-tyranny and bringing in these sorts of things? Did you have any sort of big, I guess, red pill moment, or have you always had the right opinions?
I've always been correct.
Yeah,
even
right.
as I've changed my mind, it's always been correct. I think I've always been sort of comfortable with things that were not like 100% mainstream. Like I enjoyed Pat Buchanan a long time ago and was like on board with, I liked him, and I thought, and I was fine with that not being cool. Like even in my kind of right-wing circles that I was in, people would make fun of me for being like, for showing up at least in a little bit into the top part of the political compass test, you know. Like I was a pariah for being like, oh, you're a little bit up here, ha ha ha. And that was always like interesting to me, where it became uncool, and I was like, that's fine with that, just because I thought it was cringe, like at a certain level, the sort of some of the ideological stuff about libertarians, but yeah, I think that it gradually kind of has taken more form, as 2020 was a big deal. And I think I wasn't really like a heavily political person. And I wouldn't consider myself like, I wouldn't be learning about this stuff if it weren't in my face all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so like trying to define it is a much more urgent project than I think it would have been 20 years ago, 50 years ago. If I just wanted to be in entertainment, or if I wanted to be in like Christian ministry or something, any of the things that were interesting to me, it wouldn't be as much of a necessity. But because it is, and because it's kind of like, well, if everything's going to be political, then I guess I should figure out what's going on. And so, yeah, I mean, like Aaron, you mentioned Aaron earlier, or Oren, I always pronounce it wrong, but his like tweets, and then going into his podcast and following his reading list has been a huge deal for me, along with just other people that I've continued to listen to. So yeah, like I said, it wasn't like, I didn't ever think, oh no, I'm reading people who got canceled from National Review, I must be a bad person. It wasn't ever that. It was like, I wasn't scared of going there, but it was, I don't know. So, but it was gradual. I mean, in terms of there's been an evolution. There wasn't like a moment, but yeah, it being gradually more and more in my face made me into what I am today, whatever that is.
So how did you get started down into this world of making content and doing videos, and the different stops that you've had along the way? What led to that?
Well, I was so like I said, I've been obsessed with like comedy and stuff like that. I was politically, I've always been at some level on the right. And so what I did, I in all of my odd like maneuverings around in my life, somehow I ended up working at Louder with Crowder. I don't know if you're familiar.
Heard the name a couple times.
Yeah. So I was there for 2 years, and it happened to be 2019 and 2020. So I came in as the sound guy, and then gradually started writing on the show and doing like writing stuff there. And so I was able to.
How did you get in? Was it just a job, or did you apply specifically because you were a listener and wanted to be?
No, I had a friend who had done some work for them, and just said, "Hey, they're looking for a sound guy. I know you know." I had done enough like live audio stuff to where I could put together a resume that looked continual. And so it was like
itself.
Exactly. Yeah. So it was like enough part-time stuff and full-time stuff that was like, okay, cool. I did it. There were no gaps in my audio resume, even though some of them were part-time. But so I ended up just going there on the strength of the audio thing. All that happened really was I went in and like fixed a major audio issue that they've been dealing with for a while. And that was enough for them to think of me as like a wizard. So I was,
nice.
I was like, oh yeah, fix one problem, and then cool, I got the job. So yeah, I got to be there for a couple of years, and it was a very fun time to be like doing content. So like 2020, when April came around, we were doing 2 shows a day. And you doing 3 shows a day, that's a lot. Especially when it's like, some of it is heavily researched ahead of time. And we're doing like basically a radio show at night, or a radio show in the morning, and then trying to do our attempt at a late night kind of podcast at night. So I got to do just kind of a lot of writing doing that, and just like getting my chops done, like working on my chops live with high stakes and deadlines. So that was the strength of being there. And then so again, came on as the audio guy, but it was obsessed privately with like late night comedy and stuff. So tried to pull things in that direction, tried to like make things that way. And then in 2020, at the end of 2020, we moved up to Idaho. So, and then my family moved up here, and then I did 2 years where I was just kind of in the back seat here at Canon Press. So I got to try to like promote stuff that I've been benefiting from for a long time. So books that I've been reading and videos and stuff like that. Like I found out about Canon Press through YouTube. And so being able to like promote and share stuff again that I've benefited from for a long time, and do that, like I said, with a backseat. And then 2 years rolls around, and I decide to like, hey, what if I did this kind of odd thing? And since the beginning of that, it's evolved, because like the beginning, I was doing like 3 or 4 stories and doing like 4 or 5 jokes a piece, and then it would still end up about the same time. But it was like that kind of thing is just harder to click on if it's like, oh, here's 5 minutes whereas in a late night show, if you talked about 5 stories, that would be fine because everybody's watching and nobody's clicking into the video. So it gradually evolved to where it was 1 story per video, and maybe 2 where it's like the one we showed with Trump and the Libertarians. That was like 2 stories that were interesting and trying to figure out how they fit together. And doing a big compare and contrast helps that along. So yeah, that's kind of the long version of like, again, starting with a weird private obsession and then getting some reps in by being able to do that at the Crowder show. And then now just trying to do my own thing and figure out what it is.
So when you presented that to him, so for those who don't know, Canon Press is Doug Wilson, right? That's his organization. Yeah. So my background, I was raised Seventh-day Adventist. For a long time. And then my family I was homeschooled. My younger siblings were all homeschooled. So my family got involved in the Christian homeschool movement back in the 2000s, started doing, like, my siblings all did like speech and debate, and they went to homeschool conferences and stuff all the time. Cool. So Vodi Bakum was basically probably the reason for like all of my 20s. I kind of wasn't really involved with the church at all, but his sermons were things that kind of kept me hooked. His Why I Choose to Believe the Bible is one of the single best sermons I've ever heard. But
Vodi's great. Vodi is great.
He is a good man.
Yeah.
So I was what was I going to say here? So when you presented this idea to him that you wanted to take on starting to do a show like this, how was it received? Like, were they all like gung ho, or did you have to sell them on it? How did that go?
They were excited about the prospect. They really were. And part of it is like some part of, I mean, you talked about like homeschool kind of stuff. And so that people know Canon Press and know Moscow for different things. And one of them was the, what was it called? Credenda Agenda magazine. Mm-hmm. So it started off as a church newsletter, and they would write like articles about parenting or articles about like church and stuff like that. And some of them got collected later on in books. But one of the opening page of a lot of those was the Cave of Adullam. They called it the Cave of Adullam, and it was like jokes. So sometimes it was like satire pieces, and other times it was just essentially late night monologue jokes on the front page, which I think is very fun. And like so enough to, and it stirred enough controversy back in the day to where like Doug Wilson he wrote a book called A Serrated Edge, which is about like a biblical defense of like jokes and like making fun of people who are bad. And so like that, which a huge helpful book for me, especially as I was trying to figure out if there was a good way to do this. And so reading that book was really big for me. And so it's a part of the kind of Canon brand or the kind of Moscow brand that wasn't functioning in the same way that it was back in the Credenda days. And so branding wise, it made sense at some level for them, even though it might've been a throwback. It was a throwback for them, and was also new in a way for folks who had just come along. So we saw a lot of growth in 2020 and 2021. And so people who had been helped by Doug's appearances, like at college campuses, stuff that he was doing in like 2012. So like people benefited from that, but then also got, but that piece of it, that credenda piece where it's like, oh, we like satire, we like making fun of stupid things. That piece, we were trying to figure out a way to kind of make that work again. And so it fit a branding need here. And also it's nice and sticky. It travels. It's the kind of thing, it's not like pure, we talk here sometimes about like how, what we want to do is have something that is at some level a well-rounded diet, so that it's not everything is vitamins. And I think that if we have like something, if we just have vitamins, it's because we're like messed up. Something's wrong with you. And so if all we're offering to people is vitamins and not like meals with treats and meals like things that are actually helpful to people, it's not always going to be supplements. And so I appreciated that kind of thing, and tried to, as I was pitching it and talking about it, talk about it in those ways. And I think it's functioned that way, and been a helpful way of bringing people along. And I think hopefully expanding Canon, because I like I said, I love Canon. I love being here up in Idaho, and so it's fun to promote Canon, but also like expand and try to do something that's a throwback, but also fun and new.
Man, I in 2020. So my son was born in 2020. I lived in Washington State most of my life. My wife and I moved down to Southern California, and in 2020, my son was born. That was a very interesting year, and we decided to GTFO from Southern California. And the two places were Southern Idaho, like Twin Falls area, and South Central Texas. And we wound up opting with Texas because we had a larger social network here. Yeah. But I miss the West Coast. And the Pacific Northwest, just like Eastern Washington, Idaho, Eastern Oregon, just most beautiful part of the country, in my opinion.
Totally. I grew up in Arkansas, lived in Florida for a little while, went to Texas for a couple of years, and then moved up here. And so all the places that I've lived are very flat. So I was in Northeast Arkansas, where it was like rice farms, so like wet fields, flat, everything, and a beautiful place, great place to live and great place to grow up. And I love those people. But yeah, like first time we traveled up here to the Pacific Northwest, I was like, this is a postcard. And we're like driving through and looking out every window. It's like, there's a postcard this way, there's a postcard that way. and like, I was so impressed by like the drive from Spokane to Moscow, but people are like, oh, that's actually kind of a lame drive. And I was like, no, it's the best thing that I've ever seen in my life. There's elevation here. You can look up and there's still land. But yeah, I love living here. It's a beautiful place. We're in the Palouse. And so just like you can just Google image search Palouse, and yeah, like beautiful rolling hills. And yeah, it's a great place to live. 6 months of winter, which I've come to love. I've come to I've come to be a winter guy, even having lived in Florida for a few years. But I love it.
I always thought that I was a hot weather guy. I was born in Reno, and I've always said I kind of have the high desert in my blood. Yeah. And living out near Palm Springs, I was like, this is just absolute heaven. So I was like, I'm moving to Texas. It's hot, but I love hot weather. Oh my God. Yeah. Hot weather in the Southeast is just a whole new animal.
It's different. Yeah.
I went to college in Walla Walla, so I'm very familiar with that whole area, and it's you're making me homesick.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it here, man.
One of the things that we've talked about on the show here before is, Parker Mize in the chat, he says, we're only able to watch on X. Yeah, the YouTube stream isn't working for whatever reason. I'll get it cut out and uploaded to YouTube later on, but for now we're just on X. One of the things we talked about before is touching on the generations. I noticed a while back, talking to my co-host who's a Zoomer, and he's right on the cusp of Zoomer and Millennial, but there's a very clear differentiation there, because I'm very much a Millennial as well. Yeah. And I was thinking about the personalities of the different generations. Have you read the book, The Fourth Turning?
I haven't, but I keep getting recommended it, and I need to do it. But go ahead.
Yeah, so that was kind of one of the things that kicked it off for me. And I started recognizing there was sort of a parallel between the millennials and the boomers, that the millennial generation is kind of, there's a guy in my Discord who put together a whole spreadsheet breaking this whole thing down, and he called the millennials echo boomers. So they're kind of like the millennials grew up living in the world that the boomers wanted to exist, and trying to live in that sort of fictional world, what I've called naive boomer idealism. And the millennials are like really invested in living in that world and making that world happen. They're very grandiose, very idealistic, very kind of naive, is just sort of as a generation. But then you've got Gen X, which is much more, they were the latchkey kids. They're more, they've got a little bit more of a renegade kind of personality, a little more individualistic. And they're also very much more inclined to types of humor like irony and dark humor, and a little more like the subverting of things. They're more comfortable with that. Then the Zoomers, of course, are just like, the Zoomers are basically like Gen X on acid or something.
Sure,
so there's an interesting connection between these. But one of the things that I think is the millennials and the boomers, I'm gonna advocate for us now. The millennials and the boomers, I think one of the there's been a reaction now where there's a lot of cynicism and negativity and pessimism, and everybody's starting to really lean into the irony and not taking anything seriously. Like, it's not cool to take stuff seriously anymore. You have kind of, everything has to be a joke, but it's sort of in like a negative sense. There was something that you said in an interview I was listening to yesterday. You said, I think it was kind of summarized. You said, if you're getting radicalized, you have to make sure that you're still being fun to be around.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Could you elaborate
totally.
on that a little more?
100%. So like the, one of the things that like C.S. Lewis in The Abolition of Man talks about, like, it's okay to see through things. I think it's toward the end. So like, it's okay to see through things, and you should see through things in the way that you see through a window, so that you can see something on the other end of it. And but he talked about the people at his time were trying to get people to see through everything, which is basically the same thing as being blind. And so if there's nothing on the other end, then you're done. Like, you're blind, you can't see anything. And so like, that's how I see like postmodernism. That's why I see, like, in the kind of, it's okay to tear down things. It's okay to like be, I don't know, jaded or cynical about things that are stupid. Like the writer Meryl Marco, who was the head writer at Letterman's show for a long time, said that she started off all of her comedy pieces by writing the question, "Why is this stupid?" at the top of her page. And it's just like, okay, cool. That's my starting point. We're going to move forward. And so like, what you think is funny is going to have a lot to do with what you think is stupid. But if you think everything's stupid, then you're just sort of like, I guess we laugh as we descend slowly into the sea, you know? And it's like, I think Tim Dillon is a great comedian. But I also know that at bottom, his entire like perspective on life is very sad. And so like, he sees through everything, which is the same as like not having any kind of fallback. So like, the fun to be around part of it is like, oh, we still have things that are valuable. And so like, Tim Dillon is funny, but at a certain level, after you listen to him for a while, you start to get sad. You start to like, I'm kind of absorbed this like nihilism. And so like, I was having a fun time, but then now I'm not as good as he is at like pretending that there's something that matters. And so like, but having like being able to know, okay, I can see through this so that I can see something solid on the other end of it, is a much more healthy psychological practice. And just know, okay, there's some things that are true. There's some things that aren't stupid, and they're like, and being able to value those. It puts you in a much more healthy psychological state. And like comics are trained to see through stuff. And so like, that's why you get a lot of like this guy's an anti-woke comedian. It's like, okay, well, he's just been trained to see through crap. And that's great. Like, it's a good skill to have. But it doesn't mean that he sees truth on the other end of it. It doesn't mean that he's got, like, if I look out a window and I see a tree, that's great. If I look through a window and everything's a window and I'm blind, then I'm dead. Like, what's the purpose of like, you can't. So like, the anti-woke comedian or the anti-woke person may be able to see through stuff that is crap, but they've got nothing to offer in exchange for it. So you can value those guys, and I appreciate the stuff that they've torn down. You can, you can enjoy when people tear down things that are stupid. But like, keeping your hope and keeping some like hope in a sense, but also just like reality, like, oh, and there are things that are real and things that are worth valuing. And so that there are people love talking about like comics. It's like, oh, there's no place he won't go, you know, like, there's no sacred cows for him. But I don't know, ultimately that kind of makes you just hit dead ends constantly, where there's nothing that is like worth, I don't know, why are you tearing down? You can't tear down everything, because not everything is stupid. But I don't know, that's why it's nice for me. I mean, you talked about having a child. It's like, I have 4 kids. I have a wife at home, and it's like, there are things that I love, and I love my church. I love my friends. I love my family. And those are things that are sacred and happy to me. And there are, like, because I can try to see through things that are stupid, but also like love and guard and I think that's part of it. I may have gone on too long about that, but
no, that was great.
That is, I think, part of being fun to be around is like, oh, there's something that matters to him, and matters to him enough that's worth fighting for. Because I think in that podcast I used the example of Robin Hood, where like Robin Hood is like my guy. You know, he's the kind of guy and nobody could ever come to Robin Hood and explain to him like, no, you don't understand. You should be sad constantly because they kicked out the king. This guy's taken over and he's acting like he's king. And now we're stuck out in the woods. Why aren't you sad, Robin Hood? You're living in the woods. It's like, no, it's fun. I get to like kill the king's deer. Like, I get to walk up and put my feet on his table. Like, that's fun. And like, we're having a good time, and no, like nobody would convince him that like, yeah, he knows how bad things are, and he's fun, and we're having a good time. Like we're gonna fight, yeah, sure, of course. But there are very few scenes, like there are sad scenes in the Robin Hood books and in like the Michael Curtiz Robin Hood movie. There are sad moments, but there's not a scene where they sit down and just go like, I don't know if I can really handle this. This is like, there's no. They did that with like, I don't know what your thoughts are on the Lord of the Rings movies, but
I love them.
Okay, but you like what they did with the Lord of the Rings movies was also like make Aragorn a little bit sad and like, I don't know if I can really handle this, or like, oh, he's eating him up, and like the books, that's not there at all.
Right.
But you have to have that if it's going to be a modern movie. And so like I way prefer guys who are just like, yeah, no, we're going to go and I'm going to be king. It's going to be awesome. And I like, cool. Well, King Richard is the actual king, like, and just like a quiet confidence, knowing the truth, and like I can see that Prince John is stupid, because I know King Richard's actually in charge and everything's like, and so my mind is straight so I can be fun.
This is so fantastic. I love this, because there's actually the stream that I'm going to be doing tonight with Meta Prime and Dimes. We're going to be talking about this specific phenomenon. There's I'd say in our circles broadly here, the kind of the dissident right wing, mostly present on Twitter, also on YouTube community, there's a lot of noticing. There's a lot of people who observe lots of things, and they have lots of opinions about the things they're observing. But at the end of the day, with a number of these different guys, I'm not going to name names right now, maybe on the stream tonight, but there's a number of different guys. We coined a term here, the goonic, and it's a portmanteau between gooner and eunuch, because ultimately, if you have a guy that is selling you, he's wrapping everything up in this like right wing package. Yeah. And, you know, masculine and just the appropriate amount of racist and sexist, and to show that he's a real free thinker and not bound by the longhouse or whatever.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, if you get down to the bottom of his tweet thread, you'll see that it's, in essence, some form of nihilism. It's there's nothing you can do about this except be mad and wait for daddy to show up someday and fix your problems for you.
Right. Yeah.
And it's completely impotent. There's no virility. There's no passion. There's nothing to build on. It's a foundation of clouds, essentially. And these guys end up being their entire vibe is very negative and cynical, and it's kind of a downer. And I think this is the point you're making here, that if everything is stupid, then nothing is stupid. Just kind of like, if everyone is responsible, then nobody is responsible. This is a funny thing about everything and nothing, is that if everyone is responsible for making something happen, then there's nobody who's actually responsible, because the definition of responsible is something that picks it picks out, and there's an implicit hierarchy there. I think this is something that is a responsibility of men, and it winds up being these guys are great critics of the existing system, but then, like, when you really get down to the essence of what they're talking about, they're really kind of embodying the system, embodying the resentment and the cynicism, and it's like, well, okay, what am I going to do now? Just lay down and die? Like, what do I do? What positive, affirmative thing can I get into? So I've come to where now I will intentionally just go consume really cheesy, wholesome content, because it's rewiring my brain to look at and appreciate cheesy, wholesome content.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. I think that like a big part of it also, you can kind of feel out who has families.
Yes.
You can sort of like get a vibe and just go, okay, I think that guy has a family at home. He's never talked about it, or like, that's not something that, and like, it's fine to not talk about your family. And I totally understand like why people would not want to bring particulars and like all that kind of stuff. And I haven't like said my kids' names or anything like that, but like it's the kind of thing where, I have to build for the future. And because it's not that I just want to restore America, because in some theoretical world in my mind, I think that would be a good idea. Or like, I haven't done some math problem and go like, well, restoring America would be the right thing to do because it's gone through my math formula. It's like, oh no, I have kids. I have 4 kids, and I want the world that they grow up in to, at some level, be on the right path that we're headed toward. And so like you can afford a lot more despair if you like don't have, if you've like canceled yourself, if you've canceled your bloodline, you know?
Right.
But like if you haven't, and if you have like, okay, well, I cannot afford to not work. I cannot afford to not like push things forward. And that's, I forget who said this. I think it was Andrew Klavan, funny enough, but he said like that he said having kids for him was like a money machine. Where it was just like, okay, I have a kid. I got to get up and go. I got to work. I cannot just sort of, because he's like a perfectionist, and he's like, well, I can't not finish this book, and I can't not, like, I got to finish it because this kid is in this, like, cradle, and there's some kind of future that this kid has to have. And I admire that. I admire that kind of like far-seeing thing. But and of course, that kind of nihilism and poison can happen to anybody. But I don't know. There's something about having kids, or having some, or at least moving in the direction of futurity, that helps psychologically. I'm not an island, and I'm not doing math problems about politics in my head. I'm actually trying to push things forward for individual people who have my last name and my genetics and are going to be around in long after I'm dead, and also into eternity. Like, okay, that matters to me. And so the world they grow up in matters.
I misspoke on the show once, and I said it's become kind of a little slogan that we need to build the trees of the future. We got to build the trees. Just plant the trees for our future generations to rest under. But build the trees.
I like building trees. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It's something about fake world here that there's a joke in there somewhere. Yeah. Man, I really like that image of if you're just looking and seeing through everything. At no point, if you just can't take anything seriously, then if there's the buck has to stop somewhere. It has to stop with taking something seriously and building around it, choosing this is going to be my foundation, and then the question becomes what makes the best foundation. And this is where I think your point is well taken. That when my son was born, here I am, a guy with one kid, expounding on the wisdoms of fatherhood. But my son was born. It clicked for me for the first several months watching him grow up. I was privileged enough to be able to spend several hours with him every morning for most of the first year of his life. And watching him grow up, I realized that I was re-experiencing my own childhood and seeing my own childhood in a new light. And it occurred to me, we always, we think of you have your like infant and then toddler, and then like you get to adolescent and then teen and then adult. And it's like at adult, you've kind of stopped. But I realized as soon as I became a parent, I was like, I have a whole bunch more maturing that I have to do. I'm already an adult. I had kids late. I had my son was born in my 30s. Okay. But I have so much more growing now to do that I realized that really parent is like another level of maturity beyond adult.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and no hate for the people who like can't have kids or that kind of thing. But it's like there's people say that you don't really know something until you've taught it.
Mm-hmm. Right? Oh yeah.
Well, okay. Well, but about tying your shoes? What about like sitting still for an extended period of time, or like how to like? Okay, now in teaching that, I'm actually learning and like maturing myself, and watching as I watch them progress, then I see myself progressing in like tiny ways. So like and I think like folks hear that and they just go, okay, so what you're saying is that there's no possible way that you can like whatever, like grow beyond. Like people look at this. I heard Paul F. Tompkins, who's a comic, say something like, "Oh wow, well you never like." He said he had friends who said, "You'll never know what it's like to have you just don't get it. You don't know." And he's like, "Well, yeah, I do. Yeah, come on. What do you mean?" And actually, no, you don't, and that's okay. And like because there's something experiential that does change about like your perspective on life. And but so being very thankful again for my 4 kids. I got 3 boys and a girl. And I love them. They did they're doing like soccer camps and stuff like that for the summer. And that like the fact that all of my political opinions and all my like thoughts about what's going on in the world are like I don't just go home and then think about those more. It's not just like I go home and then I keep working on my like little theories and like working out like actually no, this would be good. But like I have to take a break from that in order to pick up my kid from school, or like I have to take a break from that in order to go like interact with real people who are again going to be around long after I'm dead. That changes things and changes the like flavor of your work. Because again, you can't see through everything. But I should mention again the image of like seeing through stuff in order to see something on the other side. That's C.S. Lewis, Abolition of Man. So if anybody wants to pick up that book, it's a great one. And also just anything C.S. Lewis ever did. Everybody should read that.
Yes, absolutely. It reminds me of St. Paul talking about seeing through a glass darkly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and that was the image that came to mind. So what's the I converted to Orthodoxy about 2 years ago or so. So I haven't been really keeping my finger on the pulse of evangelical Christianity as much lately. But I know you did a bit about a mutual friend of ours, Kryptos. He did a stream on managerial Christianity. And there's this term I've been seeing around lately, the I don't know how you pronounce it, I just read it, regime evangelicals. I don't know if it's regime evangelicals.
Right.
What's your assessment of the stake of evangelical Christianity and this phenomenon, managerial Christianity, that Kryptos was talking about?
Yeah, so I think that evangelical Christians as a voting bloc are kind of crazy. So like it's crazy how consistent they've stayed compared to like everything else changing. And so the regime sees that as a huge obstacle. So and again, voting blocks, we can talk about voting, we talk about like I get all that. But like as far as like America being so like no matter your persuasion or like there's something there that's happening that the regime doesn't like and doesn't like for particular reasons. And so I'm a Presbyterian in the evangelical kind of world. And so but I can still recognize, okay, the SBC, that is something that they would love to see conform. And so as that happens, and as you kind of start to recognize managerial techniques and stuff like that, again, I really enjoyed Kryptos's article about that. But it's the kind of thing that like the church shouldn't be doing that, but also like from the world outside impacting the church, they want that to be kind of a subset of their system. And so like, yeah, of course there are going to be people where like they want David French involved, right? They want Russell Moore involved. They want like, those are the leaders that they want the like white evangelical church to go after, because those are regime friendly people. And that's like, because, yeah, it's strategic for them. And when the evangelicals don't follow them, they get very frustrated. So yeah, the clip about like the SBC and evangelicals kind of taking on the values of the world, it's not just me, like the values of the world in terms of managerialism and kind of going along with the managerial revolution. That's not me just going like, hey, you guys are like lame, I hate you. It is me going like, hey, if all the things that you say you want, you're not going to be effective at it, and you're not going to be the force that you currently are can be compromised by going along with the system that has like impacted you. So I say all of that with, again, I'm not part of the SBC anymore. I grew up in the SBC, but like I'm not part of that anymore. But I can see, okay, well I'm an evangelical. I'm a Christian, and I want there to be pushback to the regime. And the fact that the enemies, like the regime sees evangelicals as something that needs to be steered, is a really good sign for them, and just goes, okay, well then you guys like steel your spines. It's going to be tough, and like, I don't know. I will always have this like strong admiration for like regular evangelical people in the SBC or in non-denominational circles who are a real frustration to the bad guys. I love that. I love those people. Yeah.
I've got a soft spot for you guys because my little sister is actually attending Reformation Bible College down near Orlando right now.
Yeah.
So I still get some updates on the various different things happening to her.
So that's in Sanford, Florida, and I used to answer phones for Ligonier Ministries.
Okay.
I worked there for a little while when I was in Orlando.
Yeah, nice.
I went to Reformed Theological Seminary in Orlando for a year and then quit. So I'm a seminary dropout, and then worked at Ligonier for a year, and then ended up working the Crowder Show. So that's my
nice.
I went from answering phones at Ligonier to the Crowder Show. So,
I think she actually works for Ligonier right now, if I remember.
Oh, cool. Very cool.
Yeah,
that's awesome. I love those guys. I still love Ligonier.
Yeah, they're good people, and they're very there's something very Americana about that whole whole vibe.
Mm-hmm. Well, and like as much, again, like no matter your persuasion, if you love America, you love a nation that was founded by a bunch of Protestants. And so like again, no matter your persuasion, like Catholic, Orthodox, whatever, you're like, okay, well, I love this place that a bunch of Protestants built, and so like you have to love the Protestants too. And like, I think that's a big unifying kind of thing. I am a Protestant, so but I also recognize like there's if we want a revived America, there are probably going to be a big, huge Protestant element to that. And I think that's something worth celebrating. And I talked on Twitter recently about Chesterton, who was like a guy who he was like made a bunch of arguments for democracy. And I'm not like like ideological Democrat or anything like that, but like his arguments for democracy were because he just loved regular people in England. And just like he loved what England was and where it came from and kind of this thing. And I think that that's a similar kind of patriotism that we've got to have about America. It's just like, I love just like random Americans. And I love just like where we like, okay, there's something about like, yeah, what you said about just loving Americana stuff that again, you may go like, oh, that is not an appealing like doctrine to me, or like, oh, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't like do that in that way. But still just going like, all right, cool. Like, go for it, man. Like,
yeah, right.
Well, yeah.
Like we don't have to be doctrinally aligned to have an enjoyable picnic together and throw a football around and
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your take on the so-called Christian nationalism movement and to what extent is that like, is this like a really big issue? I'm doing the Trump hands down here. Is this like a really big issue?
I've been doing them down here. So yeah, I'm hiding.
Yeah. Where it's a mimetic thing happening here.
Exactly.
Is Christian nationalism is this something that's kind of a fringe thing happening within evangelical Christianity from your perspective, or is this a hot issue?
Yeah, so I am the narrator of Stephen Wolf's Case for Christian Nationalism. I did the audiobook for it.
Oh, nice.
So I've read the book, and there's proof that I have read this book. You can go to Canon Plus, canonplus.com, and you can see the proof that I've read that book. And I enjoy that book. It's the kind of like, so there are different people who call themselves Christian nationalists, and I've never like called myself a Christian nationalist, but I like people who do. And so there's this kind of there's in one sense it started as a smear, and so like it then moving into, okay, well, I'll take on that label because I prefer that label to other bad names that you might call me. You know, like, okay, I'm a Christian and I'm a nationalist and I think those interact with each other. Okay. Like I that kind of approach to it, I totally understand. And so, yeah, like I like Stephen Wolf's book. I think it's cool. And mostly his project is mostly a like Anglo-Protestant retrieval kind of project, which I appreciate. And so it's like, okay, if you call like Althusius, if you call like Calvin, and if you call these people Christian nationalists, okay, but it's like he's trying to make arguments out of that heritage, which I appreciate. And again, is like what I see as a pretty American kind of project. So again, I think that there's a real energy there, which I appreciate, and a kind of energy that is, in the sense, just like, okay, well, at some level, despite all the differences that might between the people who might call themselves Christian nationalists and not, I think that there's a sentiment that I share in common with them, or with the Christian nationalists, that would be like, I want God to be pleased with my country.
Mm-hmm.
And so that I think that has legal ramifications. And so if that's a scary enough sentiment to people, and then yeah, sure, whatever. Like again, I haven't worn the label, but I'm not ashamed. If somebody calls me that, then I'm not going to like get angry or fight somebody, because like, yeah, I'm a Christian. I believe in the goodness of nations. I think that Christian nations should exist. I think more Christian nations should exist, and I want God to be happy with what's going on in America. So yeah, I mean, as far as like my perception of what the movement is, I don't know. I think it's whatever. If America does have some kind of like future, and I want to work toward that, then it will have to be a Christian future, and it will have. And that's yeah. Again, you can like whatever label you want to attach to that sentiment. I'm cool with. Yeah, sure, whatever.
Right. Yeah. I know. I know that there's within the more apostolic faiths, there's split opinions about it, because yeah, sorry, it's the way my categories in my own brain. It's the all-encompassing term for basically Orthodox and Catholic.
Yeah, no, I know, yeah.
Now the Anglicans are mad. So I know that there's obviously there's quite a long history of different Christian faiths fighting fighting bloody conflicts between each other. And really, actually, this is part of what the liberal project arose, like through Voltaire. Voltaire was fed up with Catholics and Protestants fighting each other, and he was like, all right, let's just agree, let's find some common ground where you guys don't have to keep fighting over everything. And so thus was born part of the liberal project. But like I know that for example, like icons, there's a most Protestants are not, it's not something that they're comfortable with, and even to the point of some people are openly hostile to them. So I've heard cautionary warnings from different Orthodox priests who've said, be careful with this sort of thing, because you could find yourself in a place where all of a sudden the tone of the political mainstream has changed, and now being an Orthodox or Catholic person who wants to venerate icons, now you're going to be accused of worshiping idols, and this is going to be outlawed and that sort of thing. And I do see that as it's not without historical precedent. But at the same time, like you say, it kind of goes along with, originally I was making this observation in a more secular domain, just as a political spurg, that if as I'm reasoning my way out of identifying as an anarchist, I'm like, well, there's going to be leaders, there's going to be rulers, there is a government, there's going to be a government. So now the question is, do I want that government populated by people who are more sympathetic to me or less sympathetic to me? Do I want it? If I'm going to have a president, then I would rather have a Christian president than a non-Christian president. And even if it's not a Christian president who perfectly represents me doctrinally, the fact that he's a Christian president is better than him being an atheist president. We can move things along this way. So,
well, there's Pastor Doug Wilson. So he wrote a book called Mere Christendom, which I think is actually a great approach, a great goal, in the sense like he sees Christian nations functioning under a like Nicene Creed kind of unity. So like there's this kind of Christendom that I think can happen. And so there were the mistakes of the like first Christendom. He advocates for Christendom 2.0, and the mistakes of the first Christendom are not things that I would want to repeat. But I don't want to avoid them because it's not that I want to avoid them because I'm a liberal and because I think that they're unimportant, but because I think that they're like, we can figure out how to work together as Nicene Creed enjoyers, or like Apostles' Creed enjoyers, I think that's the kind of like, and not getting into the debates about the particular wordings, but like there's a I don't know, like an affection for people across, and I would characterize it honestly as a Protestant kind of thing. So I'll advocate for my people, and so like I think that there's C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity, him like there are Protestants who get mad that in his, like he says, imagine there's like a hallway of there's a house in the hallway and then like all these kind of rooms, but it's what I'm trying to get you to is that hallway. So like he's trying to convince people and so I'm trying to get you to the hallway. I understand that there are going to be differences, and there are Protestants that got mad that he included the Roman Catholic Church as one of the doors in the hallway because he's not being Protestant enough. He's saying like he's saying that these differences don't matter. But he could, like, it's kind of a Protestant house. So like his way of thinking about that as being like one of the branches is a very like Protestant way of thinking about it, which you can like or not like. But I'm a big C.S. Lewis fan.
Oh yeah, I mean, I did happen to learn recently that within the last few months, I think before he died, he traveled to Greece and he attended an Orthodox liturgy. And he wrote in a letter that something about like having just experienced heaven on earth or something like that. Cool. So I hold that arrow in the quiver that if he'd lived just a little bit longer, we would have gotten him.
I love that, man. Well, the guy knew what was going on, and like so him recognizing spiritual life. I'm not like such an ideological Protestant that I would not be like, oh yeah, he was recognized like. He must have, I don't know. He was compromised later in his life. I think C.S. Lewis is an example for that any Christian can like just, he comes up constantly in what I'm thinking about. Same with Chesterton. Again, I being a Protestant, like love him as a Roman Catholic. He was baptized in the Anglican Church, but whatever. But yeah, and like what I love though is like that there's a kind of spirit to like in-house debates where what I see as in-house debates that like recognizing friend enemy, is huge.
Yes.
For going, okay, we're and also recognizing like in-house versus like not. And I love those kinds of conversations. Like having that clear in your mind makes things much more pleasant.
Yes. I had a brief stint when I first encountered orthodoxy where I did the what do they call it? Is it cage stage Calvinists?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Is that I think that's a term that was coined by Calvinists referring to their own people.
Right.
For those who don't know, it's basically the guy who's a new convert and has decided that it's his life's mission to argue everyone ad nauseum about every single point.
Right. And the name coming from like for the first like year or so, he should just be locked in a cage. Right.
Oh, is that what it is? I always wondered. Yeah.
That's the cage stage. Just like go in a cage for a while, and then you'll like be able to walk out and be like, okay, my assumptions have changed, but I'm actually pleasant now. Oh,
right.
Nice.
Yeah. Back to what you said about you have to make sure you're still fun to be around.
Yeah, totally.
I had my little brief foray into the ortho bro online phenomenon, and then the blood sports debating and everything, and then it's just I burned out on that real quick. Yeah. And I mean, growing up having been exposed to the Christian homeschool movement, and I've got a deep love for those people. That's a very a down home culture. They're big on family, big on even like proper gender relations and raising children the right way. And it's a very, I don't know, wholesome Americana thing that I think it's not that I think the doctrinal debates don't matter. I think that there's a domain for those, but ultimately, friend enemy. You got to recognize the certain debates are need to be kept within their domains, and then you can still be a reasonable human being with other people.
Yeah, and that those in-house debates can be fun. You can have a good time.
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been awesome, man. It's been really, really fun getting to know you. Do your shilling. Tell people where they can find you, and if you've got any other new projects coming up or anything you're working on.
Yeah, so Wade Show with Wade. That's my show. I'm on YouTube. Canon Plus is our streaming service at canonplus.com. I'm on Twitter at Wade Stotts. I'm on X at Wade Stotts. Excuse me. We are exclusive on X, and so I don't want to mess up the name. So I am Wade Stotts on X. You can follow me there and kind of follow. So if there are any new exciting projects, then I'll be sure to let people know through those avenues.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys. If this is your first time showing up on King Pilled, then do me a favor and subscribe to the channel. Hit like on the video. I guess we're not streaming on YouTube right now, but I'll get the video up on YouTube there, and you can follow me on Twitter at RealKingPilled. Appreciate you guys dropping in. And then tonight at 8 p.m. I'm going to be having another conversation. I got to make sure the streaming works before then. I'm going to have another conversation with Dimes and with Meta Prime, and we're going to be talking about a parallel movement and beginning to focus on doing productive masculine things and actually building and creating things versus spending all of our time just yelling into the void. So make sure you show up for that. Thanks, Wade. It's good talking to you, man.